Hey everybody, welcome to tonight's late night happy hour with the Kamenetzky Brothers. Brian Kamenetzky, Andy Kamenetzky, joined tonight by Alden Gonzalez for what would I call this? So it's not even Alden 2.0 because Alden 1.0 is such a disaster. It just didn't work. Like we're just gonna
I think this
as if
would
it
be
never happened.
right. Well, maybe this would be Alden 1.5. Like it's somewhere between the second go around and the first one never having happened. So it's Alden 1.5. That might be the best way to put it.
It's kind of like baseball spring training, right? Kind of started a little bit, couldn't really get off the ground, and now here we go again. I'm just trying to segue into
Wait,
what we're going to
Alden,
talk about.
is this your way of trying to tell us you're going to be filing a grievance with us next year?
It depends on how this next hour goes.
Are you already looking forward to the grievance?
Or that our show is somehow virusy. We do have periodic sicknesses.
Viral is probably the word. Yeah.
Yeah.
Viral is the word. I wasn't going to say it.
So this is exciting, and of course, also exciting is the fact that the show is brought to you tonight by vsliquor.com, the easiest way to have liquor delivered right to your door, any door, no matter where your door is. You just tell them which one, and they'll bring you your booze. So I am very, very excited to have Alden on the show for a couple reasons. First of all, is baseball is like starting.
Are you already looking forward to the grievance?
Turn your radio down. Alden has
it's the
baseball
Periscope
to
restart.
actually
There's
go-
nothing I can do about it. We've been through this. I can't start it. I cannot start the Periscope and refresh it without the volume being on. It's impossible.
Do these technical difficulties only happen when I'm coming on?
No,
the Periscope thing is a lot of shows. It's an unfortunate, weird part of the Periscope not starting at the exact moment the rest of it starts. Like it doesn't refresh automatically.
Of course,
and when you refresh
you
it,
turn your volume down a little bit, before. I mean,
but
I'm
then
just saying
you know what will
workarounds.
happen then? No, but what will happen then, I guarantee, is if I turn down the volume, it'll be the exact moment you say something to me, and I won't hear it. So it'll be as if a glitch happened anyway. So there's the problem. There really is no winning formula. So we could just pretend the thing didn't happen, but instead we draw attention towards it.
So Alden, what time do you you have baseball to cover tomorrow, like actual baseball. Tell us where you need to be and how the hell this is going to work. I mean, do you have to wear a hazmat suit? How many temperature checks? I'm legitimately fascinated by the procedure because we got, Andy, I assume you got it too, our credential thing for to go cover summer training or summer camp or whatever. And
summer camp is presented by Camping World, by the way. They already got a sponsor for it and everything.
Really?
They're leaning in, yes.
That's actually really clever. So what do you have to do tomorrow? What's the deal?
So I think, and I don't know if you could tell that I'm struggling still to center myself.
That's fine. Don't
still working through that. It's backwards from how I would normally orient myself. So I think my schedule tomorrow is a pretty good encapsulation of just how weird all of this is going to be. So I think summer camp, and I'm going to use that in quotes from now on, summer camp, is open to the media from about 12:30 to, I want to say as late as 6 at Dodger Stadium. I have a hit to do on SportsCenter in the morning, so I got to get there around 9 a.m. And so I got to go there and do my hit. But then what they tell us is that if you're going to come back for the normal summer camp availability, you have to leave the facility. And then you have to come back for 12:30. My wife actually made a great point about that. She was like, wait a minute. So isn't it worse if you're leaving and then coming back to a place as opposed to staying in a facility? And I was like, yeah, you're kind of right. I think a lot of this is they're still figuring it out on the fly. Nobody has any idea how this is all going to work out. I mean, a big reason why baseball is implementing a runner in scoring position, extra innings, and you might laugh at this, but it's because they don't want games going on for a long time because they don't want people together in one place for a long time. They want to try to get people out of there. It's not just for fans or for entertainment. It's because they don't want people in the ballpark for that long. So it's all weird, man.
But
every time a pitcher gets taken out of a game, he should just get sent home. They should just let him go home. Because I mean, say it's a starter. What difference does it make? Because everything's going to be done by Zoom anyway. So just send the guy home. Let him do his post game interview from home. It's one less person in the park.
Well, two things for that. One is if you are part of a baseball team but are probably not going to play. Like for example, if you were the starting pitcher the night before, or you're a guy who's maybe nursing something but it's not going on the injured list, they want you sitting in the stands, not in the dugout. Obviously, there's not going to be anybody in the stands, so you could socially distance there. And if you're an employee, if you fall within, because and not to get maybe too granular here, but baseball hasn't worked out. They're dividing everybody into three tiers, and everybody in tier one and tier two are the people who could come in contact with the players and who could be in the clubhouse and things like that. If you are part of tier one and tier two, but you don't have anything to do in the game, they want you to go home. So they don't want people at the ballpark if they don't need to be at the ballpark.
This is one of those things, though, that because we'll get if you make a ranking of all the sports that could happen down to the ones that absolutely won't.
Right.
I feel sort of at least semi-optimistic about the NBA being able to kind of pull it off because smallest rosters seems like a pretty well thought out plan. Like all of that stuff, you put it together, and then you get down to the end, which is college football, which I think has 0% chance of working this year for all kinds of reasons. Baseball is sort of in the middle, but I don't understand, like, some of the logic doesn't make sense where, like, they've been together for 3 hours at this point, 3.5 hours, but it's so unsafe that you have to start a guy on second base for the 10th inning. I don't mind it because I am all for remembering my days covering baseball, whatever ends the game faster. But in terms of just the logic of disease there, I don't quite understand it.
I don't understand a lot of it. I was reading through that operations manual, and some of the things just made me laugh. And I don't mean to take this lightly because this is a very serious situation, obviously. But like, so
no, I'm guessing you're laughing because it feels like they're taking it lightly, not you.
Well, yeah,
if I had to guess,
sadly. But one of the things that they say is that for players, if there's a dead ball and there's a runner on base, like they want the infielder to like get as far away from that runner on base as possible. During the national anthem, they want the players to stand 6 feet apart. And actually, an editor brought this up to me that I didn't even think about. If you have like these 30-man rosters and these coaching staffs and everybody who's going to be on the field, if everybody is standing 6 feet apart during the national anthem, I feel like that's just going to like encompass the entire field, right? Like everybody's just going to like, there are going to be people like standing on the warning track.
That's okay.
Like, right. So this, I think some of the players have made the point that if we're going through all these temperature checks and we are taking a COVID-19 test every other day and all these precautions are being adhered to, why can't they just do whatever they want once they get into that facility, once they get into the quote-unquote bubble? But I think there's a very easy answer to that, and it's that the typical COVID-19 test that they're going to take every other day, those tests are going to be flown over to Salt Lake City, and then they're going to come back with the results. And they're going to take at least 24 hours for those results to come back. And so you look at how this virus has gone, this spreads still very often among asymptomatic carriers. So there could be players who are going to be negative, but they don't know it yet, and they're in the facility. So I think that's a big reason why, even if you've taken all the precautions, you still need to socially distance, and you still need to wear a mask if you're not on the field. And even that, it's not going to be foolproof. I mean, baseball's a sport where you could do social distancing more so than obviously basketball and, of course, football. But, I mean, there's just going to be a bunch of instances when you come in contact and how easy it is for this virus to spread. I just don't know how this is going to work.
You know who would have been perfect for this era, Andy?
Who?
Jeff Kent.
Oh,
Jeff Kent was born for these rules.
Jeff
Barry
Kent,
Bonds, maybe, too.
Yeah.
Kent and Bonds. It's so amazing that those two were on the
Unless they're fighting
same
against
team.
each other.
Yeah, well, those two are on the same team, like backing each other up. Like some days Kent was third, Bonds was fourth. Some days Bonds was third, Kent was fourth. But either way, they were so perfect for each other temperamentally, and by all accounts couldn't stand each other. But like we covered Jeff Kent. Jeff Kent, I've never seen anything like this in my life. He created tension throughout an entire clubhouse, like palpable tension. Like this was something that guys on the team, semi-openly or certainly, off the record talked about like this being an issue simply because he wanted nobody talking to him. Like he basically wanted an entire clubhouse uncomfortable just so nobody would talk to that guy. Like so everybody would leave him alone. So it was crazy. I've never seen anything like that before.
Two Dodgers that I've heard consistently bad things about have been Jeff Kent and Kevin Brown. I never covered Kevin any Brown of them, but those were the two that I've.
You know, it was funny. Like Kent wasn't awful, only in the sense of it was so well established that he was who he was that you kind of like if you didn't need him for whatever reason, you could kind of ignore him. He was literally, as Andy's saying, like in the very corner of the locker room. And there were times, like when you needed him, when you had a question, whatever it was, when he felt like it, he could be really good. And never like friendly, but like as in terms of just giving you a good and thoughtful answer to questions that you're asking, he could be really good. There were other guys that I thought were jerks, kind of in that like. Andy Ashby, he was nice.
He was like, I remember one time he was
like openly hostile.
I was like, what is this? Like, we never even met, dude. Like, he really was like very openly like adversarial towards me. I'm like, have we met? Like, what are you doing?
But that clubhouse though, and we've talked about this a lot, that clubhouse was really the first time that I got a really good feel. Go back to the one where the Russell Martin, James Loney, Matt Kemp, those guys were coming up, and Nomar and who else was on that team? It was like Lowe and Nomar and Luis Gonzalez and some of those guys. It was just really interesting.
Petty.
Yeah, Brad Petty. Some of those guys. Just it was the idea was always that veterans are great in the clubhouse and they show guys how to lead and with a lot of those guys it just wasn't true. Like they were great until their jobs were being some were really good, but
some guys were the reverse. Like Juan Pierre, for all the issues that Juan Pierre dealt with underperforming, certainly by his contract and also I think just the expectations they had, and those type of issues, and being in and out of the lineup. Juan Pierre was terrific in the clubhouse. Mm-hmm. Stand-up dude. He was great with the younger players. Like for all the flack that he took, and he was really disliked by fans down the stretch. Terrific in that clubhouse.
Yeah, and it's tough because sometimes it's hard to separate the way players act toward us as media members, who they see us a lot of times as infringing on their space, mm-hmm. as opposed to maybe how they might act with their own teammates. I'm still not able to center myself here. I'm still trying
honestly,
to figure this
out, we've had people do entire shows halfway out of the screen. It's fine.
You ever play those video games where like you're flying an airplane, but like up is down and down is up? That's kind of what I'm struggling with here. But anyway, so back to my point. So sometimes these guys come off bad to the media. Jeff Kent is an exception because I've heard he's just a bad teammate. But they're actually good clubhouse leaders. Like I think, so I'll give you an example. Like Chase Utley. Chase Utley, I think, is a legitimately good teammate. He's not great with the media. He's actually he's just never around. At least just from judging him as a player. I'm not saying he was a bad guy, but he was probably one of the least accessible players that I've ever come across. But maybe he's a good teammate. So it's hard. Sometimes it's hard to parse those things because the way they act toward us and the way they act toward their teammates a lot of times is completely different.
Yeah, it's just my biggest thing about it was just like and this is just from talking to other guys. You could see that tension between some of the older players and some of the younger players.
I heard that about those Dodger teams.
Yeah, and it was one of those deals where it was just like an introduction to, and it's not like this guy's a great guy, this guy's a terrible guy. Matt Kemp was, is a petulant child, and this guy, like nobody. It's never 100% any of that stuff. But it was just for me. It was a really good, like some of the cliches and some of the sort of the tent poles and sacred cows, particularly in baseball, because baseball is so full of them. You have to be suspicious of all of them. It was really instructive as a writer and as a reporter to ask sort of the questions of like, really, is that what that is? And So I mean, I learned a lot about that. So like when you get into a Lakers locker room this year, and everybody talks about how great the chemistry is and how great everybody gets along, you have that initial suspicion of like, well, everybody always says that. And then you dig a little bit more and you find out, yeah, no, actually, really, everybody does get along and the chemistry really is great because it just isn't always as it seems. That was sort of my point.
Right. Now, actually, Alden, Brian and I haven't been around the Dodgers much in the last few years on an even semi-regular basis. Like,
that, by the way, is not going to change this year.
I don't picture that changing this year. What's the vibe of this core, just in terms of like the main players and the interactions between them, and just the chemistry, however you want to define it?
I think it's a group that legitimately likes one another and likes being together. I think there's a lot of common interest in that group. I think what helps is I think most of the guys are just pretty laid back. I think has sort of softened a little bit at an older age. He's talked to me about this before, about how just having kids, he's still the same super regimented guy, but I think having kids has sort of maybe softened him around the edges a little bit. He's maybe a little bit more laid back, a little bit maybe more giving of his time to teammates. I think the Dodgers clubhouse culture is probably evidenced most by how you're seeing younger guys sort of being comfortable, finding their own voice, and coming into their own as quickly as they have. You look at a guy like Walker Buehler, Cody Bellinger, even like somebody like Will Smith and Gavin Lux and Dustin May last year. They'll talk about that they come in and they just feel comfortable. And I don't think you would expect that from a group that has sort of the decorated stars that the Dodgers have, the experienced players that they have. But like Justin Turner's a good guy. Kenley Jansen is a really good guy.
Yeah, he is a good guy.
Clayton Kershaw's a good guy too.
Yeah.
I've had great experiences with Clayton Kershaw. I found him to be, I mean, he's obviously a very good philanthropic person, but I think he's become a really good teammate who's more willing to put an arm around guys. Rich Hill's not there anymore, but he's also a really good guy. Like, I don't know that there are a lot of sort of bad apples there. I think it's a group that really likes one another.
You know, it's interesting when you mention how these younger guys on the team feel comfortable finding their own voice and speaking up, you know, at times when they feel it's necessary. That's great to hear. And it's the way you're describing it, it sounds like it's really, you know, a tribute to the veterans in that clubhouse. Because when Brian and I covered the 2007 team, which is hands down the worst locker room or clubhouse I've ever been around or covered in professional sports, the young guys on that team, Russell Martin, Andre Ethier, James Loney, Matt Kemp, those guys found their voices, but it's because they were forced to, because the veterans were always bailing. Like every time after a tough loss, those guys were never.
Brad Penny, for example, was a ghost. If you know,
yes,
great, happy to stand out in front of his locker if you know he pitched a good game, but good Lord, if he didn't, he was a ghost. And there were a lot of guys like that in that clubhouse.
I heard that about that team. I don't know if it's that year specifically, but that time period, that it was very divided. It was very segregated in terms of the older guys and the guys coming up.
I will never forget this because it was you know, really electric and, you know, like a scene like I've never really witnessed before in baseball, but also just because it was so telling and funny. I was there when Manny Ramirez showed up for his first game, and he's in the clubhouse. You know, this is his first day. He's probably never met some of these dudes before. And he set up like his speakers at his locker, and he's just blasting salsa music in a clubhouse that has never had music before. Like to that point, I had never heard music in the Dodgers clubhouse before. And he's just holding court and blasting the salsa.
Oh, I love that guy.
Everybody's excited. And I look over and I see Jeff Kent in his corner, just looking like this look on his face like, yeah, it's over. Like my reign is over. Like the way I want this thing is over.
Nice.
And beyond it at that point becoming Manny's team, like just in terms of personality and the guy that everyone gravitated towards, it was also going to do something to, I think, kind of unify that schism that you were talking about. Because there still was that division between the older guys and the younger guys. Not quite as pronounced as the year before, but it was still there. And all the young guys, though, loved Manny. Like, they all loved him. And for that team, too, it was a release that they all needed.
That's awesome, first of all. It's exactly how I want to picture Manny Ramirez, who I never covered. But it's also just so ballsy to do something like that when you first get there. And, I mean, everybody knows the summer that he had. He just was the best player in baseball. So he
right.
He
Well,
does
that's the
and
supreme
then he's great,
confidence.
and you can't deny him.
Yeah, it's the supreme confidence that you have of being that guy and knowing what you are when you walk into any clubhouse. I mean, it's a shame he had trouble getting pregnant, but but beyond that, it was right on that edge to where I think people started to revolt, not just inside baseball, but like people like us outside of it. Like, wait a minute. Why do we freak out whenever anybody flips their bat a little bit or watches a home run a tiny bit or seems to smile ever playing baseball? Like, why do we look at this like, the playing the right way and all, like, and the backlash against that to where we are now, where I feel like there are more people like, come on, let it go, play more like they do in Korea, do more like they do in Latin America, all that kind of stuff.
When Hong Chi-Kuo, there was a year, it was either 2006 or 2007, I think, Hong Chi-Kuo hit a home run and flipped his bat. Like, this was something he did all the time. He was a reliever at this point. Like, I mean, he had like maybe 7 at-bats the whole year. I don't know how this happened, but I remember he hit this home run and he just both casually but badass tossed this bat like it was his 50th home run that year. And I'm watching this going like, why aren't the other guys like this? Like, if Kuo can celebrate a home run, why can't the rest of these guys?
Because it's Korean baseball. That's what you do. You hit a home run, you flip your bat.
I think that repressed culture is thawing a little bit, though, and it's because of what you said. I think young guys are coming into the league feeling a little bit more empowered. I think that has something to do with the fact that major league players are ready quicker than they've ever been. I mean, you're getting guys who are 19, 20, 21 years old who are super polished and like ready to be in the big leagues because these guys are playing baseball year round and going through to these advanced pitching and hitting gurus, and like these guys are ready, and so they have that confidence because they know that they belong there. I mean, I remember one of the things that I've been the most struck by in covering baseball, and I think this is going away a little bit, but guys get to the clubhouse super early, like 7:00 game, they're there noon or 1. And what happens is veteran players get there early because that's what the veteran guys did when they first got into the league. And so they do it, and then the young guys feel like they need to do it too. So if ex-veteran players here at noon and I get here at 4:00, that's going to be a bad look, and I'm going to be looked down upon in the clubhouse, even though I have nothing to do. Like, these guys show up there, and they're just, like, looking at their iPad. They're not doing anything. They don't have any treatment to get. They're not getting any early hitting done, nothing. They're just doing it so that they don't look bad in front of the veteran guys. Like, baseball has been so consumed by eyewash and fake hustle for so long. Like, it's just part. But I think that's kind of going away a little bit. I think part of this, the pandemic and all the realities of social distancing, will allow people to work smarter. I think that's going to apply to industries all across America. And I would think that it filters down to baseball as well.
Well, there's no industry, by the way, that works more smartly and efficiently than the alcohol industry, especially
no fake hustle and eyewash from vsliquor.com.
Absolutely not. No, wow. They are always authentic. They keep it 100. They're a real one. Like, you talk about the real ones, vsliquor.com, they're a real one. Anything you want, all right there, one click on its way. And right now, Alden, first order, type in sports with your checkout, you get 15% off, vsliquor.com. So how confident are you that there's actually going to be a season? Because Rob Manfred's already having to, walk back a little bit of comments that, express some skepticism or, just the idea that they'd be lucky to finish all 60 games that they have planned for this year.
Give me a second, because I'm still having a hard time adjusting to your transitions here. They're really fast. Let me just get my head together. Okay.
It's positively dizzying.
Yes, we keep everyone alert, Alden.
You didn't get that kind of level of just slick professionalism earlier tonight when you were on with Sliwa, did you? Like that's what you were expecting. You were expecting more something like that.
I'm not going to comment on that, but I will say that I am thoroughly impressed by your segues. I really
In fairness, the guy had just eaten 9 hot dogs, so give him a break.
So baseball playing this season. Buster only said recently that there's a 0% chance that they complete the season. I'm not going to go that far. But I still have a hard time seeing how this is going to happen. And I hate sounding like that because every platform that I'm on, I sound like the super negative guy at a time when we're all searching for as much optimism as we could find, like baseball's supposed to be like that sort of escape that we need right now. I don't see how it's going to happen for many, many reasons, which I can go into. But one of them is just the logistics of keeping this virus from spreading when you're in that environment. So I've been talking to players a lot about this over the last week or so. And it's that as detailed as that operations manual is, they didn't account for everything. There's no way to police all of these things. And what it's going to come down to is if we get the season off the ground, it's going to come down a lot to discipline from the players themselves, them holding each other accountable. And you're looking at a situation where these players for about 3 months are going to have to live like monks. Okay? And for some, that's going to be a lot. And you got to consider the fact, too, that baseball is in many ways an encapsulation of America. And you look across this country, there are some people who take coronavirus very seriously. There are some people who don't. There are some people who are all about wearing their masks. There are some people who are not. There are some people who believe that they can get coronavirus, they're going to be fine, and they're just going to go on and live their lives. That takes place in baseball clubhouses, too. And so you need to get that buy-in from players who are inevitably not going to be taking it this seriously. And to be frank, the only way that this season can work is if players take this so seriously that it embodies their focus every second of every day for a period of at least 3 months. And everybody has to buy into it. Can it happen? Sure. Are there going to be positive tests even regardless of that? Yes. We're going to see a bunch of them tomorrow. Tomorrow, Major League Baseball is going to announce not who tested positive, but how many people tested positive during the intake screening. We're going to get a lot of them. So,
But stop there for a second. Is there a number that they would consider to be worrisome? I only ask because, like with the NBA, for example, they came out with a number, and I think the positive test rate for the NBA players was different than staff, but it was players was like 7.5%. So not crazy in a small sample size. You know, if you 1 or 2 more players in either direction, and it bumps it up and down, whatever, but not nothing either. So if it's, let's say it's 8 or 9%, 10%, whatever it is in baseball, how much concern do they have for what happens before everybody starts going in? But baseball's not bubbling in the way that basketball is. So, you know, like positive tests in basketball don't necessarily mean much. How much do they mean in baseball?
It's tough to say, and that's another thing, that they're not bubbling. So they're going to be traveling, and they're going to be getting on airplanes, and they're going to be riding on buses, and they're going to be staying in hotels, and that creates more dangers with this. But I don't know that there's a number. They haven't said a number. I don't even know what that number would look like. I think it just depends on who is infected, right? Like, I hate to say it, but if Mike Trout tests positive for the coronavirus and can't play for a few weeks, if it happens to Ronald Acuna Jr., if it happens to Aaron Judge, I mean, if stars keep going down left and right, I think that's when maybe Rob Manfred might consider.
Give me a list of players where it's cool if they get coronavirus, where everybody's on board. It's like,
That is a slippery slope that I do not want to go down.
Yeah, I didn't. If you're a pro, I did not expect you to answer that question.
But I think another thing that is going to derail this is if you have city and county ordinances that don't allow for the gatherings that would allow baseball to take place. I think we saw some of that with whatever county it is that the Pittsburgh Pirates play, where they announced today, I think, that media is now not allowed at PNC Park to cover that summer camp portion, and that they might have to reconfigure their schedule. This is going to keep happening, and as is my plight with trying to get centered on this camera. And so it might have, like, Texas, cases are surging in Texas, cases are surging in California, where there are 5 Major League Baseball teams. In Florida, where there are 2. Texas, there's 2. Arizona, it's getting bad there, and that was seen as a hub city at one point. I don't know what it looks like, but I think somebody else said this, and I forgot who it was, but I think we'll know it when we see it.
What happens if there is like what's the protocol if 2 players inside a clubhouse test positive during the season? Like, what happens? This is the other part I can't figure out.
So they have to test negative on 2 tests taken at least 24 hours apart. They have to be afebrile for a 72-hour period without using fever suppressants. And there's a couple of other things that they have to do. The thing is, you don't know how long that takes. Like, even if a lot of the people who test positive for coronavirus, I'm sure, are going to be asymptomatic, but even if you're asymptomatic, I don't know how long it takes for you to test negative. Mm-hmm. So that's the part of it that is hard to figure out. You're going to have a bunch of positive tests. Guys are going to be sort of swimming upstream from the beginning because of all the positive tests at the onset of summer camp. How long is it going to take before they test negative on 2 tests? 2 is there's a contact tracing investigation that goes on with this. So anybody who tested positive, they got to identify anybody that they were in close contact with during that time. And then those players need to either isolate, or they need to take a diagnostic test where results are back quicker. But those are players who also are going to be affected by this. And that's where you really run into the problem of a potential outbreak.
But they have a game that night. We already know who they've been in contact with. They've been in contact with all those guys over there. So are they going to be allowed to go play? Right. It's like we know who they've been. Like those people. So can they all go out and play? I don't know what happens. So they have to cancel the game that night?
So the operations manual says it's close contact. I don't know what that means, and obviously, like, you could interpret that however you want. But think about it, that happens on the road, right? So teams are traveling with their active rosters, which is going to start at 30, then 28, then 26, plus a 3-man taxi squad. Nobody else. So if the day of the game, a bunch of people test positive, and they have to do the contact tracing thing too, well, like, you might have 10 players who are not available that game. Like, it's just, I hesitate to say it this way because it might sound a little too bleak or maybe insensitive, but I've had this conversation with other players that this season, if this season is played, it's going to be basically a war of attrition, where whatever team avoids positive tests the most might win the World Series. I had somebody tell me that the other day.
Well, I don't think that's insensitive. I think that's in a lot of ways just being pragmatic about this. I mean, it's not the only right. It's not the only thing that's going to end up ultimately affecting who wins the whole thing, but it is going to be a factor. I mean, the Dodgers, for example, enter the season, at least in the way we see everyone right now, as, you know, one of the favorites to, at minimum, win the National League. Right. I don't care, and it's in part because they're one of the most stacked teams in baseball. I don't care how stacked you are. If you deal with a few semi-outbreaks of COVID this season, the Dodgers are not going to end up winning the World Series. They're not going to make the playoffs because they're going to end up with too many guys missing.
Yeah, exactly. Which is why there's no way of predicting this season. Like, 60 games is already, like, you're shrinking baseball sample size down by almost a third. But then you throw in the reality of the pandemic, and it's just there's no telling how.
Let's talk about that though for a second, with the assumption that they actually play games, because I think we even touched on this a couple Saturdays ago when you were on with us on the Saturday morning happy hour.
A lot of happy hours for you guys, and also a liquor sponsor.
It's our brand.
Starting to catch on here.
Yeah, it's a different deal when we bring in the
know thy demo, know thyself.
I dig it, man. I dig it. I'm all for it.
If there's a dispensary, by the way, I can't say what the station will do. I'll just say we're not above it. Like, just so if anyone's listening,
there are a lot. Look, I have. Nobody's really asked before. Not a lot of people have asked before, but. You know, you always talk about, like, what would you endorse, what wouldn't you? There's certain guys who will read anything for money. And I would not read anything for money, but, like, they
call those people Ireland.
Exactly, John Ireland. But like the one thing that I would never do are remember how like a few years ago all those like gold commercials, like you do the read for the gold guy or the guy who the investment dude or whatever it is. That's the one thing I would never ever take the endorsement of whatever, because I don't want the guilt of telling somebody else to do like what to do with their money.
I won't do that one, and I'm not going to do the lawyer who's always just basically giving you advice on how to get out of your drunk driving convictions.
Yeah, that's a little. I don't like that one.
Basically, where the drunk driver becomes the victim. Like somebody needs to stand up for this habitually drunk driver, and damn it, I'm that guy. Like I don't want to be a part of that. Like that feels pretty skeevy. Like it's one thing. Everybody deserves a lawyer, and if you get arrested for drunk driving, you deserve a lawyer. That's the way things work. However, campaigning this, like having your whole ad campaign as if the rights of drunk drivers are being violated on a daily basis, and somebody
I'm not
needs to
comfortable
stand
with
up
that.
for it. No,
but let's pretend here for a minute that the season's going to be played. The predictive part of this, because not just it's the 60 games, it's COVID, it's all this stuff. It's the tiny spring training where you're going to get into the season and it's not like pitchers are going to be ready to go. So the Dodgers have a great starting staff. What exactly does that mean? So like, if you have a great starting staff, how much of an advantage do you have over 60 games if for the first 25 of them, nobody can pitch more than 4 or 5 innings anyway?
Right.
How do people going to use their bullpens? What about some of these weird new rules? And it would be a little bit different anyway this year because of the 3 batters for the bullpen guy. And then now you have a DH in the National League. Like everything is so weird. I don't know how you predict anything with even the tiniest level of confidence.
I will say this, and I would stop short of say that Dodgers have we're parsing semantics, but I wouldn't say that they have a great starting rotation. I think it's good. I think it could have been a lot better.
They have, they have
Bryce
a lot.
having
They have a lot
struggled.
of people to put in a starting rotation that are pretty good.
That's the point I was going to make. They have a lot of depth, and I think if there's a competitive advantage, I think the true competitive advantage, as we talked about earlier, is going to be discipline from everybody in Tier 1 and Tier 2. But that sounds really boring. I think the true competitive advantage is going to be just depth. And it's funny because people talk about how the Dodgers are set up mostly for a 162-game season because over the course of 6 months, you really tap into your depth. I think depth is more important during this 60-game season than it has been in any other season because of the coronavirus pandemic, because you're going to see guys go through a lot of maybe soft tissue injuries early on in the season because of that quick ramp up to the season. Like you're just going to cycle through a lot of guys. And so you got to look at it. How many legitimate major league contributors do you have on your roster? No team has 60 of them, right? Team said 60 player pools. Nobody has 60. Dodgers might have 40 of them, though. I don't know that any team has more than that. And I think that's why they're especially set up for a season like this. The reason why the Dodgers continually run into trouble in the playoffs, and I think the Nationals were a great example of this. You look at last year's National League Division Series. Numbers 6 through 25 on the roster, the Dodgers were supremely better than the Nationals. I mean, it wasn't even close. The problem, the Nationals' top 4 guys were really, really good. Maybe better than the Dodgers' top 4 guys. And so when you shrink it to a 5-game series and there's not a pandemic, that stuff shows up. But when you have to tap into depth, that's when the Dodgers are scary good. And that's why they're more set up to win this season than any other team. And then having said that, the Marlins might win the World Series.
Let me ask you a quick question. Let me ask you a quick question because I know we're going to end up shifting to the NFL soon. And Brian knows this is always a question I have every year because I'm just sort of fascinated by this in general. Do you think this, as normal as this season can possibly be, and the way you judge, I guess, a normal starter, do you think this is going to be the year where Julio Urias finally gets treated like a normal starter? Because every year he gets talked about as part of that rotation, and every year he's treated with kid gloves. And I know he's had injuries and stuff, but it still affects his actual usage.
I don't think any starter is going to be treated like a normal starter this year. I think just
Okay.
the extenuating circumstances make that really difficult. I mean, think about just that first month of the season. Um, Pitchers normally have about 6 weeks in spring training to get stretched out. They start with 1 inning, then it's three, then it's four, then it's five, then it's six. Guys that I've talked to, and I'm sure guys in the Dodgers are the same, like during this quarantining time, they were getting off the mound every once in a while, but they were just trying to keep their arm active. They weren't building any real length because they had no idea if there was going to be a season starting. So that first time through the order, I'm sure Julio Urias is going to be one of their top five guys. As a matter of fact, the Dodgers said it in the offseason that Julio Urias is part of their rotation. Those guys are going to be going 2-3 innings, and then you got to take into account maybe any injuries that might happen or COVID outbreaks or anything.
So we may never learn the truth with Julio Urias. That's basically what you're saying. Like who he is, we may just never learn.
It's fascinating with him because he came up and he was so young, and then he had those shoulder injuries, and then every year just like it keeps coming by, and then at some point you get to a certain okay, we need to know. I really
like Brian knows I'm fascinated by this.
That's true. Well, especially since he is only still 14 years old, which is fascinating.
I really did think this was the year that we were going to learn about him. I don't think that's going to be the case anymore. I think you're going to have like 7 or 8 different starting pitchers for every team this year. But I think, honestly, how old is he now? He's got to be like 22, 23. Like he's still really young. It's a tough way to develop, though. I'll tell you that. A guy that age, to be like, you're not even one of the back end bullpen guys. You're sort of quasi mop-up duty.
He's about to turn 24. He'll turn 24 in August.
Okay, so I mean, he's still young, but we got to start finding out.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But to pitch in that multi-inning role in a mix of between high and low leverage, it's just really tough to develop that way.
That's it. I'm glad you mentioned that, the leverage thing too. Like, because I remember the last couple of years in the playoffs, or certainly like last year, he was being counted on as this guy that would be used in high leverage bullpen situations. I'm like, really? I'm not sure about that, or like a high leverage start, anything. I'm like, because his track record is he's never used in anything for leverage.
Yeah.
Like he's never used in anything that's actually that pivotal.
Maybe the Dodgers' talent hurts him because the 3 spots in the rotation are being taken up by Walker Buehler and Clayton Kershaw and David Price. And then they also signed Jimmy Nelson, and they signed Alex Wood, and they have Dustin May waiting, and Dustin May they think is going to be a real guy. And who knows if the Dodgers are in it, if we're playing a season, they could go out and trade for whoever they want. So that's where guys like Julio Urias sort of get left behind a little bit.
Before we get off of baseball here for a second, Andy and I were joking earlier today. Like, I forget players. Like, I forgot the Lakers signed Dion Waiters. Like, there was a point during this pandemic break where I forgot that he was on the team. I cover that team. Like, that's what I do, and I forgot he was. So forget baseball. Like, I know the Dodgers traded for Mookie Betts. The Jimmy Nelson thing kind of rang a bell. Like, there was some other stuff that happened. I know that Rich Hill.
Jimmy Nelson's a person who exists.
Yeah, but it sounds like a guy from the the 40s. But like I'm vaguely aware of what the Dodgers have been up to. The Diamondbacks, the Giants. No, I don't have the capacity for that. So give us a quick rundown. I know the Giants are terrible, and I'm pretty sure the Rockies are still terrible. But the Padres and the Diamondbacks aren't necessarily. Like, how good are those teams?
I don't really know anything that's going on with those teams either.
Oh my God, that's a relief. That makes me feel so much better.
No, I vaguely know what's going on. I in all seriousness, the Diamondbacks were going to be pretty good. Like, I think they were a pretty well-rounded team. They signed a guy named Madison Bumgarner.
That I knew.
Okay, you know him. He's a little older now. I still can't center myself on the screen.
You're really struggling, and I can tell you it's very important to you. I keep trying to de-emphasize
I can't even focus.
and tell you it doesn't matter, and you won't let it go.
I want people to sympathize. Okay, here we go.
I'm sure they're taking pity by now.
Here, well, let me just make it easier for you.
There we go. Oh wow, that's. Can we leave it like that?
We can.
Yes.
I mean, we're only 45 minutes into this, but thanks. Um, but so the Diamondbacks are kind of a well-rounded team. I'm fascinated by the Padres. I really am because they have like really good young starting pitching, and it's young starting pitching that probably wasn't going to contribute all that much in a 6-month season. A lot of them were going to come on late. They were going to be on innings limits. You look at a veteran guy like a Garrett Richards who was coming off Tommy John surgery, who has like explosive stuff. Garrett Richards, I don't know if you remember him from the Angels, but he has really good stuff. Like those young guys, and a guy like Garrett Richards, and a guy like Chris Paddock, who showed you last year that he could be good. Like they could no less than any other team with its starting pitchers in a 60-game season. So they're going to be a lot of fun. But look, the Giants are going to be terrible, but they might win the division. Like any crazy thing can happen this year.
Your punishment, though, is now you don't get allowed back on the screen. You know, for demanding that kind of attention and that sort of vanity. We're just we're gonna pretend you're Michael Thompson.
Well, that's just a major upgrade, though. So
and it's true. That doesn't really seem like a punishment. You know, prime Michael Thompson. I'd sign up for that one.
It's amazing how still his mouth is when Alden talks.
But he's also not centered on your screen, I'd like to point out.
Yeah,
that is true, Brian.
But he's cool.
Showing off. Yeah, Michael doesn't care.
Yeah.
I mean, we've been trying to line up Michael on this thing. If we can manage to pin him down, we're not going to worry about him staying framed or not.
You know what, though? Part of the reason Michael didn't want to come on before is because, you know, the basketball rules are they're really cracking down on guys talking about players when things aren't. Now that basketball has started again, I think Michael's able to come back. So we'll check in with Michael for next week.
And if Michael actually can be on, we will celebrate him agreeing to be on the show with a cocktail, and we might get that alcohol from vsliquor.com, the most convenient way to get your alcohol delivered to your door. Anything you want, Alden, one click and it's on its way right now. For your first order, if you type in sports in the checkout, you get 15% off. Again, celebrate vsliquor.com.
You know what? I don't want to get too sidetracked here, but Andy, I just thought of something. It would be really fun. I think I have to put 3 pictures, though, on my screen. If we just went, like, straight Michael Thompsons all the way across. Or went full quad box with just stills of Michael Thompson.
Well, if we get Michael on, we should have 1 live Michael, then 3 stills. And just have all 4 squares Michael.
Yeah.
Including the actual Michael.
That would be kind of cool. Hey, Alden, have you ever seen us do quad box?
No.
It's pretty cool.
It is
that
pretty
just
nice.
4 boxes?
Look at that.
Take a look. Take
Quad
a look.
box.
Very exciting.
I love it. I have a bigger screen for me to center myself on.
That is true. This worked out very well. Your anxiety's over now. All right,
joining us remotely is Michael Thompson, Minister of Culture. Mr. Thompson.
Is there a story behind the Minister of Culture?
Actually,
yes.
There is. Go ahead, Andy.
I landed on this interview, 1989. It's Byron Scott with Roy Firestone. I was going down a YouTube rabbit hole for something I was writing for The Athletic.
Roy Firestone, wow.
Yes, and I landed on this thing. And Byron spent the early part of the interview basically answering and responding to different things Michael had just said about him in a previous interview with Roy Firestone. And Michael was labeled in this interview with Byron when they showed his still, they showed a video clip of him as the Minister of Culture. So this is from 1989, and we actually had Byron on a few days ago, and Byron responded or reflected on this interview, which was really fun and bizarre. It was very strange.
But it's funny, like you don't know how big a deal the Lakers were, Alden. Roy Firestone was the host of their pregame show.
What?
This wasn't Michael Thompson on what was it? It was what was the name of his show? It was
the Roy Firestone show. I don't know, but the famous one everyone remembers.
Right.
The one that everybody cried on.
Exactly.
Yes.
You're not gonna make me cry. But like,
is that a Jerry Maguire line?
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
But it was all this stuff. I assumed it came from Roy Firestone's show, It didn't. It came from he was the host of the pregame show for the Lakers. That's how big a BFD the Lakers were at that point, and
Was
still
that
are.
early in his career, Roy Firestone?
No,
Or like at the height of his
1989. He was
powers?
Roy freaking Firestone at that
That's
point.
amazing.
Yeah, I mean that's only 7 years before Jerry Maguire came
Up
out.
Close was the name of that show.
Yes, yes.
All right, ask your football questions.
We were talking about baseball and the anxiety about whether or not that season will actually happen. Baseball, to me, seems in certain ways like a cakewalk compared to football. I mean, in the NFL so far, at least, seems to be trying to present this like they're going to have as much of their cake that they can, and eat it too. At least not shooting down already the idea of fans being in the stadium. That like SoFi will actually have fans in there. How confident are you, I guess, A, that the NFL season can go off without a hitch, and B, that the NFL is realistic about what it will really take to have this season, or is this just really not having to commit to downscaling, at this point? So why do it?
I'm actually torn on this answer. So on one side, I think there's no chance that the NFL can play the season because of what you mentioned, that sport, you cannot be socially distanced in it. And because I think back to baseball, and the premise of every negotiation from Major League Baseball's owners was that they needed to, the regular season ended before October, and the reason for that was they needed to get their postseason in October before that perceived second outbreak of the coronavirus, so that they could get their postseason TV money, which is invaluable in a time like this when every team is struggling financially. So football is going to be playing through that backdrop in the fall, in the winter, when they thought the outbreak was going to get even worse. But on the other side of that, I think that it will happen because of just how huge an industry the NFL is and how important it is for America and so many companies and so many employees and the betting industry and the fantasy industry that football is played. I mean, I just spent so much time talking about all the logistical hurdles involved with baseball staging its season, and I always come back to the question, if all this needs to be done, why are they playing? Oh, I know why. Money. But nobody generates money like the NFL. And because of that, I feel like they're going to try the best they can to play football this year somehow.
Well, Frank Vogel talked about that today pretty openly, I thought, Andy, in his availability. Like, they're doing this in part because the health of the league demands that they try to play. Like, and it's not just, the owners and whatever. It's like if players want to get paid, then the league needs to have as much income as it can, because that's where the money comes from. And so, I mean, I kind of feel like, Alden, we all have to get a little bit more comfortable talking about the idea that, that's really the only reason why you would do it in a season like this, is because there's tons of money at stake, and the money matters. It's okay. It doesn't make us horrible people to acknowledge that that's part of this.
No, I appreciate the transparency. Like, we live in a capitalist society and we are run by money. This country is run by the dollar. So the problem, though, with the NFL was that from the onset, it seemed like they were in prime position in this way, that they were going to start last. And they could see how every other professional sport handles this, what works, what doesn't work. The problem is that the coronavirus did not take the path that people in this country thought it would. People thought that we would have some sort of a reprieve in the summer, and that maybe the heat, these viruses would not do well. That hasn't happened.
Did we not take the path that the coronavirus? I mean, I think the coronavirus was just coronavirusing. It was the rest of us that changed.
You're so right. The coronavirus never changed. We
Right.
got sick and tired.
That is true.
of
I mean,
abiding by everything.
the virus broke no promises to us at all. I mean, it didn't go back on its word.
Right.
It's like,
Yeah,
you do
exactly.
you, coronavirus.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, I don't know, man. It's going to be really difficult. The Rams and Chargers. I say the Rams. The Rams are really doing it. The Rams are opening up this beautiful new stadium, and I don't think anybody's going to sit preparing for the reality that nobody's going to visit their stadium this year. It's not official yet, but I think every NFL team, especially a team in California, understands that there are not going to be fans at stadiums. I mean, Gavin Newsom's been saying that for months. So,
Are you Are you going to get a chance to go see like the stadium when it's done though? Will they let you in? Like they just finished the giant indoor Oculus scoreboard thing, and it looks amazing.
I've actually been reporting out a story on the Oculus for a few weeks now, actually months at this point. And so I would love to see it. It's amazing, by the way. Like I could bore you with all the details about just like how technologically advanced that scoreboard is, but it's
Give us a few of the least boring.
well, so scoreboard, like, and think even like the advanced ones, like at the Cowboys Stadium. So your view in those video boards are a lot better if you're sitting in the middle section of the stadium or in the upper section of the stadium. But like the way that this one is designed, like it has two different screens because you got the outer rim and you got the inner rim, and so like the people who are in the lower bowl have an amazing view of the game, and the people in the middle and the higher sections have an amazing view of the game. And I don't think that's ever been duplicated before. I think one of the things that the Rams might try out, and I don't know that they finalized this yet, but like you could access the Oculus on your smartphone, and maybe you could get. And maybe I'm going to get in trouble by revealing this stuff. Maybe they don't want this out there, but whatever. I don't care. You could get.
That's the spirit. That's what we like.
It's late, right? So you can say whatever you want.
And when you find that you violated off the record things, vsliquor.com is the best way to make yourself feel better.
So they're going to have that stadium is going to have a ton of different cameras.
It was late. I thought it was okay.
It was late and I was drunk.
So that stadium is going to have a ton of different camera angles, obviously, that no stadium really has. So think like all the cameras that are brought in for a traditional Monday night, Sunday night, Thursday night football game, they're going to have it in the stadium. And so like fans at that stadium are going to get views that you can't get at home on the broadcast, because if CBS has the game, they don't have access to those. So they're going to set up an app on your phone where like you could watch the game through the different camera angles that are also available on the Oculus. So like if you want like a Sean,
pretty cool actually.
So if you want like a Sean McVay camera, right? Like that's just an example. You could just look at Sean McVay though.
There's gonna be some security like layers to this, because you can't just stream whatever you're watching on your phone onto the Oculus. Because you can see how that could go wrong, right?
Sure. Yeah, I don't know how that's going to work, but I do know that like people are going to have like pretty unique camera angles on that, and like just so that the entire stadium, and I feel like a pitchman for the stadium, which makes me feel a little gross, but like it's all digital, so like the entire stadium is going to be like synchronized together, and it's all going to be like, and the Oculus is going to be like the hub for it. Like,
right.
It's pretty cool.
Have either of you ever been in that situation where like you're just like out at like the coffee shop, or you're just waiting for a bus, whatever it might be, and the person next to you is on their tablet or their smartphone watching pornography? Just like totally open and out in public, just that's what they're watching.
You can watch pornography on the Oculus if you want.
That's my point. That's what I was worried about. Like if you can just stream whatever camera angle you want, I'm a little worried people might take advantage of that.
Well, and the great thing about it is that the people in the lower bowl and the people in the upper deck are going to be able to watch the same pornography at the same quality.
I mean, look, these tickets are expensive even when you're in the upper, so you might as well get the exact same pornography angle.
How? Go ahead.
Well, people just teams talk about all the time how you got to like monetize the in-game experience so that people don't leave their house. I mean, maybe pornography is the answer to that.
It's about time we stop shaming everyone. But how critical is it? Because like the dirty little secret of the NFL is that the in-game experience isn't as good as the experience on television. Like it's a better product. I mean, short of like you go once, it's the crowd, it's kind of exciting, whatever. But actually watching the game isn't nearly as good. In part because there's way more downtime than you remember. Because when you're watching a game, there's a replay, there's a stat, there's a little interview over there, whatever it is, and given how expensive it's going to be to go there, how much PSLs cost, all this, is that part of it is like they understand like we have to make the in-game experience so good here, or we're not going to be able to fill the place up all the time?
Well, that's the perfect point. And the reason why I wanted to do this story is because I think the Oculus symbolizes the challenge that teams face in making the in-game experience unique enough to get people off their couch. Like, you have to do something like that to get millennials to attend sporting events. And I mean, the red zone package is really makes it really difficult on stadiums. Like,
I have
to
been
your house.
I have been saying for years that if I mean, I remember this is in regards to SoFi because I was saying this while, this stadium was announced and was being constructed. I would put a TV in the back of every single seat and offer you the red zone in those seats. And I would not care at that point if you're watching the actual Rams game or not, or if your attention is fully on it. That is something that might actually get people into the game. Like, if you're competing with the ability to watch everything at home and the red zone package that you paid for, you don't want to make people lose that.
Speaking of red zone, quad box.
Yeah, you don't want to make people feel like they're losing out. And, between the gambling implications, the fantasy implications, the different angles and stuff like that you get from the television experience, I feel like if you're not providing alternate TV options for fans at the game, I feel like you're actually making a mistake.
Yeah, and so the Rams want to do it so that people are showing up to like a 1 o'clock game, and this will obviously be next year, I think, not this year, but they're showing up to a 1 o'clock game like at 10, 11 a.m., and so they're watching the East Coast games. And so what they're going to set up on that Oculus is it's going to be like the red zone package where they're going to have basically every game, right? And people could just watch and keep up with their fantasy teams. And then they're going to put 5G in the stadium so that people can, how hard is it to get a Wi-Fi signal, right? When you have tens of thousands of people in one place, so that you could, your fantasy scores or whatever, check up on other teams while you're watching the game. And they have to adapt to that because they're playing professional football in a city that went without football for 20 years.
Yeah.
And a lot of people got interested in other teams in other places, and people they're realistic with the fact that people are going to go to Rams and Chargers games not because they're diehard Rams or Chargers games, but because they want to have a good experience.
Particularly Chargers.
Exactly.
Yes, absolutely. Being really blunt about this, the majority of the people in that stadium, or even close to a majority, are not going to be diehard Chargers fans. They're going to be people there, because they got tickets from friends or, corporate suites, whatever. But you have to make it so people want to come back, even if they are not major Charger fans.
And think about how difficult that challenge is to appeal to a fan base that is generally apathetic about your product in an era where technology makes it so difficult for people to want to resist the urge of leaving their own homes. You have to do something amazing, right? And I think they're doing that, but that's what it takes. It can't be less than that, because then you basically have no chance.
So how good do you think the Rams are going to be this year? I guess assuming they get the ability to practice, all that stuff, like things aren't too disjointed.
So when I covered them in 2016, 2017. What made them so good in 2017 and then also in 2018 was that, number one, I think the continuity on their offensive line was a major reason for that. Mm-hmm. Like, they started the same 5 guys all the time, and they were really good. That's why the screen game works so well for them with Todd Gurley. Play action works so well with them, Todd Gurley. That's a major question that I have, is their offensive line. And the biggest question that I have is the obvious one, which is that they don't have Todd Gurley. And more specifically, they don't have a game-changing running back right now. And Todd Gurley, in 2017, and then for most of 2018, made Jared Goff's life so much easier. And I think Jared Goff is a good quarterback. I don't think he's the type of quarterback that's going to put you on his back. And to be fair, there aren't many guys like that. It's Aaron Rodgers and it's Patrick Mahomes. Like, we know who those guys are. And so without that explosive running game, with an offensive line that might be a little suspect, especially with Andrew Whitworth getting older, I think they'll be fine. I think they'll be pretty good because Sean McVay is, I still consider him to be an offensive genius. And I think that defense, I mean, if you have a game-changing guy like Aaron Donald on your defensive line, and you have a game-changing guy like Jalen Ramsey in your secondary, like you could build around that, right? But at the end of the day, if you're going to be one of those elite teams, which I know they're trying to be, you need an elite quarterback if you don't have the elite running back, and I don't know if they have that.
I feel like this is it feels like a transition year. Hopefully they don't drop off too much, but the idea that they're going to be really good. Of course, on the other hand, like if you have to have a year to be a transition year, this is a good one. Like it's going to be a weird year where you can blame stuff on any number of things, get your roster back in order, your salary cap back in order for next year.
But so 2017 and 2018, that was the Rams year. And NFL teams talk about all the time, capitalizing on the window when your quarterback is not making a ridiculous amount of money and
I agree.
Your salary caps.
And look, they tried, man. Rams fans can't fault them for not trying.
What I still scratch my head about, though, is the extensions.
Right, they tried a little too hard.
Maybe it's just because I don't know the cap that well, although I tried studying it for a couple of years.
Too hard.
I don't think anybody really understands the NFL cap. I mean, like NFL GMs. I don't think anybody does.
Extending Todd Gurley wasn't really necessary, right? Like, I know you got to extend Aaron Donald and Jared back, and Aaron Donald because he's the best player on the planet. But all the other extensions that they gave out, I don't know if that was totally necessary. And again, like they lost a lot of early round draft picks, and that puts a lot of pressure on your drafting because you got to hit basically on a lot of third and fourth round picks. I feel like their window was those 2 years, and they didn't get it done. And now it's just financially they're in a really difficult predicament because they can't really shore up holes like they want because they got to clear a lot of cap space right now.
I mean, the irony with Todd Gurley's extension is it was done in part because they wanted to, capitalize on that window, but also make sure that he was happy, and he ended up not happy anyway. And
it's very clear that, and I'm glad you brought that up. It's very clear that they wanted to establish a culture where like guys were happy here, and they were, and like come play with, like it helped them get free agent guys. But NFL teams don't win through free agency. They win by drafting really well. And to draft really well, you need first and second round picks, and the Rams
which they don't have. It's gonna go down kind of as a disappointment if like that Super Bowl that they get to is the one that they get to, and that's basically it for that window. I mean it shouldn't have been that short. Now they have a chance to rebuild it with something else and go do it again, but the window of that team, they really shortened it themselves with some questionable moves, and it's a shame. You respect that they went for it, but football is not a sport where you do it that way, and it hurt them. Alden, we did it.
I'm still not centered.
That's fine. There are people on the chat who are legitimately think you're OCD at this point. That you're fidgeting so much with it that you literally cannot stop.
I don't really fidget. I'm just
it's just not right. It's just
this.
not. Yeah. Didn't get a chance.
Unsolvable riddle.
Next
didn't
time,
get a
bigger
chance
frame
to.
Bigger frame.
All right, fine. We'll put you in the thing. God, you're so vain. Here you go. Here you go, superstar. There's Alden. Everybody look at Alden. There he is.
That's how it should be.
All right. Okay.
Perfect.
Yeah, there we go. There's Byron. Alden. Byron.
He's in so much better shape than me.
Oh, God. He's still in great shape. Byron still is a rock. The guy's almost 60. And, like, if you're ever in studio with him, it's like, oh, my Lord. Like, I'm pathetic.
Here's Byron. Oh, other way around. Sorry. Byron looking at Andy.
With disdain, and I don't blame him.
Doesn't like him. All right, Alden, we made it. We made it through the hour. It was a much better performance technologically than last time. Thank you so much for joining us. We know you got to be at Dodger Stadium early tomorrow. Start looking for Alden's coverage from the Ravine.
No
Baseball is starting, at least for now. Alden Gonzalez, we're taking the show off tomorrow. It's a company holiday. We'll be back on Monday with someone. See everybody.
Figuring it out.
Have a great holiday.
Remember to listen to Saturday Morning Happy Hour. Though,
yes, we are doing that.
11 a.m. on
4th of July.
710 ESPN. Yes.
Go America. All right. See everybody on Saturday. Thanks.